Zatoichi movie review. So this is a Japanese movie. This movie came out in 2003. I was living in Japan at the time and remember how excited people were about this movie. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I remember one of my coworkers, a Japanese older woman, was trying to explain it to me, and she said, I don't remember, she said something like, oh, it's about a man whom the eyes cannot see. And I said, an invisible man. Yes, I know what you're talking about. Which turned out to be completely wrong, one of those translation issues. It's about a blind samurai. So this is, I guess, is kind of equivalent to Daredevil, the Marvel superhero, or perhaps there are other examples. He's blind, but because he's blind, his other senses are heightened, and he's a very deadly samurai who can hear sounds and fight in a sword fight. And interestingly enough, according to Wikipedia, this is a bit of a trope. There's like a list of blind superheroes, or blind heroes who have heightened senses. And it's something that is crossed in many cultures, apparently. So there you go, huh? It also turns out, I didn't realize this at first, but this is a remake of a 1962 film. Actually, there's a whole series of films, starting with in 1962, and then, according to Wikipedia, going up through 1989. Whole series of films starring this character. Which was why this film caused so much excitement when it came out in 2003 is, the nostalgic value. Just like in America, when there's a fair amount of buzz when they remake an old movie or reboot an old series, like the new Star Trek or whatever. I think that was the equivalent happening in Japan. I'd never heard of these movies before. I had a Hawaiian friend who told me he remembered watching these movies on TV when he was a kid. So, apparently they were being shown in Hawaii, possibly because of the Japanese community in Hawaii. Or, I don't know, maybe these films were more widely shown and I just didn't know about them. If you remember seeing these films on TV as a kid, like the old Zatoichi films, let me know in the comments. But anyways, this particular review is a 2003 movie, which I eventually got around to seeing. So this film is directed by and starring Beat Takeshi, who's a bit of an interesting guy. I think he's become known in the U.S., or at least he was known about 10 years ago for Takeshi's Castle. But in Japan, I think he started out as a comedian, and then he switched over to serious drama, and he's directed and starred in a number of films over the years. I'm always suspicious about directors who put themselves in the starring role in a movie. It seems like it probably is a vanity project, and maybe it is, but to give credit where credit is due, he does an amazing job in this movie. I don't know how this compared to the original Zatoichi actor. I have never seen the original 1962 or any of the original movies. But the way he plays it is kind of like a self-effacing, humble, old, blind man. He's just always kind of speaking quietly and quietly laughing and just kind of plodding along, and somebody you would never think would be dangerous. Until he springs into action and all of a sudden he becomes super deadly with the sword. It works. It's an interesting take, and it makes for an interesting movie. Now I'll be honest, when I first heard about this movie, I thought, a blind samurai. I mean, okay, I get it. The gimmick is that he's blind, but he's still really good with the sword. But how is this going to be interesting for 2 hours? Well, the good news is that once you actually watch this movie, the plot actually is pretty complex. So it turns out there's actually several side stories going on. In addition to Zatoichi, the blind samurai, when the film opens, we are introduced to a Ronin samurai who is seeking employment as a bodyguard to get money for medicine because his lover is sick. There's also a pair of murderous geishas who we find out are trying to get revenge on the people who murdered their parents. All of these plots start to come together as the film progresses. So it is interesting. There's enough stuff going on to hold your attention. Almost, except, I don't know, I thought it went on a little bit too long. And I tend to make this complaint with most Japanese movies I see. So maybe it's just, you know, my attention span as an American is different. But I thought this movie could easily have been 15 minutes shorter. There was some fat they could have cut out of it. Maybe that's just a cultural difference. This movie mixes a few emotions together. Beat Takeshi is famous for his offbeat sense of humor, and much of this film is played as a comedy. And it played pretty well. I mean, I'm not usually a fan of Japanese comedy, but I thought this film was pretty funny. And the ending scene is amazing. Like, if you don't know this already, it's famous for having a bizarre tap dancing sequence at the end in which the whole cast takes part. And I know that sounds bizarre, and it is bizarre, but yeah, it's quite interesting to watch. It held my attention. Mixed in with the comedy, though, is pathos. There's a bit of tragedy in here, which is not unusual for a Japanese film. They do often mix comedy and tragedy, and some Western films as well, for that matter, huh? But I don't know. It grated on me a little bit. I wasn't able to kind of switch the emotions so quickly to keep up with this film. So I think maybe that played better with the Japanese audience. I don't know. And then at certain points, it can also be a very violent film. I mean, it is about a samurai swordsman after all. There are a number of samurai sword battles in which there's limbs going flying, blood is spurting, people are getting cut in half, etc. How realistic is this? I don't know. I mean, this is always that question, right? How powerful is a sword? I mean, you know, we've all seen movies where they cuts through people like butter. Is that the way it works in real life? I don't know. I mean, there are people out there on YouTube who do know, right? Some people who have whole channels devoted to ancient weaponry. But yeah, I don't really know. I did get the impression, though, reading recently the Shinsengumi book, which talked about ancient samurai battles, that yeah, those swords were sharp and people's limbs did get hacked off when during these samurai battles. So maybe it is realistic. The thing about the Zatoichi movie, though, is as people are getting hacked to bits, they've got these funny expressions on their faces, which seems... It's a little bit hard to describe, but it seems like they're intentionally playing up a comedic aspect of it, like kind of a funny grimace as their hand gets hacked off, which I thought might have been an attempt at black comedy, and I'm not sure how well that worked. I don't know. I'm not sure that worked, although maybe I was just misinterpreting a different style of acting. I don't know. All in all, an interesting film. In spite of my complaints, it's still recommended. Check it out if you can.